I accidentally opened a group chat with 2,847 messages, and every single one was about how to take my life away from me. My name is Harold Bennett, and at 65 years old, I had finally accepted something most people fear their whole lives. Silence. Not the peaceful kind you hear in movies, where soft music plays in the background and the sun shines gently through the window. No. This was the kind of silence that fills a house that used to be alive. The kind that echoes. The kind that reminds you, every single day, that someone is missing. 3 years ago, my wife, Eleanor, passed away after a long battle with illness. We had been married for 42 years. 42 years of shared mornings, arguments over small things, laughter that filled every corner of our home, and suddenly, it was all gone. After she died, the house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a museum. Everything stayed exactly where she left it. Her favorite mug still sat on the kitchen shelf. Her reading glasses rested on the nightstand. Even her coat hung by the door, as if she might walk in any minute and ask me why I looked so lost. People told me to move on. But how do you move on from a life? So I didn't. I stayed. My days became simple. Predictable. I woke up at 6:30 every morning, even without an alarm. Old habits don't die easily. I made coffee the same way I always had, 2 spoons of sugar, a splash of milk. I sat at the kitchen table and stared out the window, watching the same street I'd lived on for over 30 years. Sometimes I talked to Eleanor's picture. Not because I believed she could hear me, but because it made the silence feel less heavy. "Morning, Elle," I'd say, placing my coffee beside her framed photo. "You'd hate this weather." It was a small ritual, but it kept me grounded. After breakfast, I'd take a short walk around the neighborhood. Most of the old neighbors had moved away, replaced by younger families who kept to themselves. Occasionally, someone would wave. Occasionally, someone would nod. But no one stopped. No one asked how I was doing. And I stopped expecting them to. My children used to visit more often. At least, they did in the beginning. Michael, my eldest, was always the busy one. A businessman, always on calls, always in a rush. He'd come by with his phone glued to his ear, hug me quickly, and leave before the coffee got cold. Daniel was different. Quiet, distant. He never said much, but when he did visit, he'd sit with me for a while. Still, those visits became less frequent over time. Claire, my youngest, used to call every week. But calls turned into texts, and texts turned into silence. I told myself they were just busy. That's what parents do. We make excuses for our children. We protect them, even when they're not there. That evening felt like any other. The sky had turned a dull shade of orange, and the sun dipped slowly behind the houses across the street. I was sitting in my living room, flipping through old photo albums. There was one picture I kept coming back to. All of us together. Me, Eleanor, and the kids. We were at the beach. Michael was laughing, Daniel was building something in the sand, and Claire was holding Eleanor's hand. I remember that day clearly. It was simple. It was perfect. I closed the album and sighed. Things change, I muttered to myself. That's when my phone buzzed. Now, I wasn't much of a technology person. I had a smartphone because my children insisted. It's easier to stay in touch, they said. Ironically, we talked less after I got it. Still, I kept it nearby. Mostly for calls. Occasionally for messages. But that evening, the notification was different. It wasn't a text. It wasn't a missed call. It was something else. A small icon I didn't recognize appeared on the screen. Curious, I picked up the phone and adjusted my glasses. The app looked unfamiliar. I didn't remember installing it. Maybe one of the kids had set it up during one of their visits. I tapped it. The screen loaded slowly, as if it hadn't been opened in a long time. And then I saw it. A group chat. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "Real family, 6 members." I frowned. Real family? I whispered. That didn't make sense. We already had a family group chat, or at least we used to. It was called Bennett Family. Though, to be honest, it hadn't been active in months. So what was this? And why hadn't I heard of it? I hesitated. Something about it felt off. But curiosity has a way of pulling you in. Slowly, I tapped on the chat. And everything changed. At first, I thought I was looking at the wrong conversation. The messages didn't make sense. They weren't the kind of messages families send each other. There were no birthday wishes. No holiday plans. No, "How are you?" or "Miss you." Instead, the chat was filled with something else. Something cold. Something sharp. I scrolled up. There were hundreds of messages. No, thousands. The number at the top caught my attention. 2,847 messages. My heart skipped a beat. That can't be right, I said under my breath. Who sends that many messages? And why hadn't I seen any of them? I started reading. The first few messages seemed harmless. Casual conversations. Short replies. But then, I saw my name. "Did Dad call you today?" I paused. Dad. That was me. I kept reading. Yeah, he keeps talking about Mom like she's still here. It's kind of sad, but also annoying. My chest tightened. Annoying? I whispered. I scrolled further. We need to figure out what to do with him. He's not going to live forever, you know. A strange feeling crept into my stomach. Confusion. Discomfort. Fear. No, this isn't right, I said, shaking my head. Maybe it was about someone else. Maybe I misunderstood. But deep down, I knew. I kept scrolling. The tone of the messages began to change. They became sharper. More direct. More personal. He still thinks we actually enjoy visiting. Just keep it up until everything's sorted. My hands started to tremble. Everything's sorted? What did that mean? I scrolled faster now. My eyes scanning every word. Every sentence. Every betrayal. Did he sign the papers yet? Not yet. He said he wants to read them carefully. Of course he does. Just tell him it's for taxes or something. I felt a sudden wave of dizziness. Papers? What papers? And then came the message that made everything stop. He'll sign anything if we say it's important. Silence filled the room. But this time, it wasn't the quiet I was used to. This silence was loud. Heavy. Crushing. I lowered the phone slowly. No, I whispered. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of mistake. Some kind of misunderstanding. But the names in the chat. They were unmistakable. Michael. Daniel. Claire. Judith. Ryan. My family. My real family. I looked around the room. The same room I had sat in for years. The same walls. The same furniture. The same memories. But suddenly, it all felt different. Unfamiliar. Unsafe. My phone buzzed again. A new message. In that same group. My heart raced as I looked down. Reminder, don't mention anything about the house when you visit him tomorrow. Tomorrow. Someone was coming tomorrow. I stared at the screen. My reflection faintly visible in the glass. For the first time in a long time. I didn't recognize the man looking back. I sat there for what felt like hours. Scrolling. Reading. Rereading. Hoping, desperately, that I had misunderstood something. But the more I read, the clearer it became. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't harmless. This was real. Every message. Every word. Every plan. And the worst part. They thought I had no idea. I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding in my chest. All those visits. All those smiles. All those, "we love you, Dad," moments. Were they real? Or were they just part of the act? I thought about the last time Michael visited. He had brought documents. Just some paperwork, he said casually. I trusted him. Of course I did. He was my son. I didn't question it. But now, everything felt different. I picked up the phone again. My hand steadier this time. My eyes sharper. If they thought I didn't know, then maybe, just maybe, that was my advantage. I whispered softly, almost to myself. You should have named it something else. Not real family. Because now I knew the truth. And the truth was, I was never really part of it. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a minute. The house was completely still, but my mind refused to quiet down. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those messages again, each word sharper than the last, each sentence echoing in a way I couldn't escape. So I stayed awake. Sitting in my chair. Phone in my hand. Scrolling. Reading. Hurting. At first, I told myself to stop. Enough, Harold, I whispered. You've seen enough. But I hadn't. Because the truth has a strange pull, it drags you deeper, even when you know it's going to break you. And that's exactly what happened. I went back to the very beginning of the chat. Months ago. No, more than a year. The messages stretched back further than I expected. Further than I was prepared for. The first few were casual. Normal. Almost comforting. We should make a separate group. Easier to talk here. Yeah, not everything needs to be in the main family chat. Agreed. Let's call it something obvious, lol. Real family. I stared at that message for a long time. They even laughed about the name. As if it was a joke. As if I was the punchline. At that point, it didn't seem harmful. Just a private group. People make private chats all the time. I almost convinced myself it wasn't a big deal. But then. The tone shifted. Slowly. Subtly. Like a storm building in the distance. Dad's getting worse, don't you think? Worse how? Emotionally. He keeps bringing up Mom. I felt something tighten in my chest. I read that line again. And again. As if maybe the words would change. But they didn't. It's been years. He needs to move on. It's uncomfortable being around him sometimes. Uncomfortable. That word hit harder than I expected. Was my grief uncomfortable? Was loving my wife for over 4 decades something they found difficult to tolerate? I swallowed hard and kept reading. We need to start thinking ahead. About what? His assets. The house. Savings. I froze. My thumb hovered over the screen. Assets? They were talking about me like I was already gone. I shook my head. No, this isn't right, I muttered. But my voice sounded weak. Uncertain. Because deep down, I knew exactly what I was reading. The messages became more focused after that. Less emotional. More strategic. The house is worth a lot now. Yeah, especially with the market. We should figure out how to transfer it before it gets complicated. Transfer it? Before it gets complicated? My heart began to pound. I remembered something. A conversation with Michael a few months ago. He had mentioned something about estate planning. At the time, it sounded reasonable. Responsible, even. Just making things easier in the future, Dad, he had said. And I believed him. I trusted him. Now. I wasn't so sure. I kept scrolling. Faster now. The pieces were starting to connect. And I wasn't sure I wanted them to. We need him to trust us. He already does. Exactly. That's why this will work. My stomach dropped. There it was. Clear. Simple. Undeniable. This wasn't concern. This wasn't love. This was a plan. I put the phone down for a moment and rubbed my face. My hands felt cold. My entire body felt distant. Like I wasn't fully there. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, I said quietly. But the words felt empty. Because the evidence was right in front of me. I picked up the phone again. I had to know everything. Even if it destroyed me. The next set of messages was worse. Much worse. Did you talk to him about the documents? Yeah, I brought it up casually. And? He didn't question it. Good. Keep it that way. Documents. Again. I thought back to that day. Michael had come over unexpectedly. He brought coffee. Smiled more than usual. Sat with me longer than he normally did. At the time, it felt nice. Now, it felt calculated. Just tell him it's related to taxes or insurance. He won't understand the details anyway. Exactly. That line hit differently. Not just because of what it said. But because of what it implied. They didn't just think I trusted them. They thought I was incapable. Confused. Easy to manipulate. I clenched my jaw. A mix of anger and sadness building inside me. But it didn't stop there. Once everything is transferred, we won't have to worry anymore. Yeah, then we can step back a bit. Honestly, I'm already tired of pretending. Pretending. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Every visit. Every phone call. Every, "How are you, Dad?" Was it all fake? I remembered Claire's last visit. She hugged me tightly. Told me she missed me. Asked if I was eating well. I smiled. I believed her. But now. Claire, you're the best at this. He trusts you the most. I know. I'll handle it. Just keep being sweet. It works. Something inside me cracked. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just, quietly. Like something fragile finally giving in. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the tear slide down my cheek. I wiped it away quickly. Almost instinctively. As if someone was watching. But no one was. That was the problem. No one had been watching. Except them. I kept reading. Even though every part of me wanted to stop. The messages became colder over time. More direct. Less concerned with hiding their intentions. Has he noticed anything? No. He's completely unaware. Good. Completely unaware. I let out a slow breath. They're right, I whispered. I didn't notice. Not the distance. Not the change in tone. Not the subtle shifts in behavior. I trusted them too much. And they used that. The next message made my hands shake again. He'll sign anything if we say it's important. I stared at it. That sentence. So simple. So cruel. Was that really how they saw me? A man who would sign away his life without question. I thought about all the times I told my children. You can always count on me. I trust you. I believe in you. And this. This was how they responded. With strategy. With manipulation. With betrayal. The hours passed without me noticing. The sky outside darkened completely. The streetlights flickered on. And still. I sat there. Reading. At some point, the shock began to fade. Not completely. But enough for something else to take its place. Clarity. The confusion was gone. The doubt was gone. What remained was the truth. And the truth was simple. My family had been planning something behind my back. For a long time. And they thought I would never find out. I scrolled to the most recent messages. My heart pounding again. Reminder, don't bring up the house tomorrow. Yeah, just keep it normal. We're close. Don't mess it up now. Tomorrow. I looked at the date. They were planning something. Soon. Very soon. I locked the phone and placed it on the table. Then I sat there in silence. But this time. The silence felt different. It wasn't empty. It was heavy with realization. For years, I thought I was alone because life had taken something from me. But now I understood something far worse. I wasn't alone. I was surrounded by people who had already decided I didn't matter. I stood up slowly and walked to the window. The street outside was quiet. Peaceful. Normal. But inside me. Everything had changed. I wasn't the same man who had opened that message hours ago. Something had shifted. Not just in how I saw them. But in how I saw myself. I wasn't weak. I wasn't confused. I wasn't unaware. I had just been trusting. And now. That trust was gone. I turned back toward the table and picked up my phone one last time. I looked at the group name again. Real family. A small, bitter smile formed on my face. Not anymore, I said quietly. Because now I knew the truth. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. The morning after I found the messages, everything looked the same. The same sunlight crept through the curtains. The same ticking clock echoed through the hallway. The same coffee brewed in the kitchen. But I wasn't the same man. Not anymore. I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual that morning. The man staring back at me looked tired, older than 65, if I'm being honest. His shoulders slightly bent, his eyes heavy with years of quiet living. But there was something new in those eyes. Something sharper. Something awake. They think you're weak, I said to my reflection. My voice was calm. Steady. Let them. That was the moment everything changed. Not with anger. Not with shouting. But with a decision. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. Because confrontation would only do one thing. Warn them. And I needed them to believe exactly what they already believed. That I had no idea. So I made a choice. I would play the role they had written for me. The quiet, trusting old man. The one who nods, smiles, and doesn't ask questions. But behind that role, I would watch. I would listen. And I would prepare. That morning, I followed my routine like nothing had happened. I made my coffee. Placed it next to Eleanor's picture. Things are about to get complicated, Elle, I whispered. For the first time in years, I wasn't talking just to fill the silence. I was talking because I needed strength. Around 10 a.m., my phone rang. Michael. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. Hey, Dad, he said, his voice warm and familiar. Too familiar. Morning, son, I replied, keeping my tone natural. You doing okay? That question used to comfort me. Now it felt like part of a script. I'm fine, I said. Just the usual. Good, good. Hey, I was thinking of stopping by later today. Got a few things to go over with you. Of course you do, I thought. But I didn't say it. Sure, I replied. I'll be here. After the call ended, I didn't move right away. I just sat there. Processing. Planning. This was it. The first move. I walked over to my desk and pulled out a notepad. Something I hadn't used in years. I wrote down one word at the top. Evidence. If they were planning something. If they had already started. Then I needed proof. Not just for myself. But for what came next. I picked up my phone and went back to the group chat. This time, I wasn't reading as a victim. I was reading as someone preparing for a fight. I took screenshots. Every important message. Every mention of documents. Every plan. Every lie. My hands didn't shake this time. They were steady. Focused. Then I did something I never thought I'd need to do. I turned on the voice recorder app. If they were going to talk, I was going to listen. By the time Michael arrived, I was ready. Not emotionally. No one could ever be ready for something like this. But mentally? Yes. He walked in like he always did. Confident. Relaxed. Smiling. Hey, Dad, he said, giving me a quick hug. I hugged him back. The same way I always had. But this time, It felt different. Coffee? I asked. Sure, he replied, looking around the house. Place looks the same. Not much changes around here, I said. Except everything has, I thought. We sat at the table. The same table where I had spent countless mornings with Eleanor. The same table where my children had done their homework. The same table that now felt like a stage. Michael pulled out a folder. There are just a few documents we should go over, he said casually. There it was. I leaned forward slightly. Documents? I asked. Yeah, just some routine stuff. Nothing complicated. Nothing complicated. I almost smiled. What kind of documents? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Just, financial stuff. Planning ahead. You know how it is. No. I knew exactly how it was. He opened the folder and slid a few papers toward me. I didn't touch them right away. Instead, I looked at him. Really looked at him. This was my son. The boy I taught how to ride a bike. The one who used to run to me after school, excited to tell me about his day. And now. He was sitting across from me, trying to take everything I had. Take your time, he said, misinterpreting my silence. I will, I replied. I picked up the papers slowly. Pretending to read. But I wasn't focused on the words. I was focused on him. Watching. Observing. Is everything okay? He asked. Just making sure I understand, I said. Of course. But honestly, it's pretty standard stuff. Standard. Maybe I should have someone else look at it too, I said casually. His expression changed. Just for a second. But I saw it. Like who? He asked. Oh, I don't know. A lawyer, maybe. Silence. It only lasted a moment. But it was enough. Well, you don't really need to, he said quickly. It's nothing serious. I know, I replied. Just for peace of mind. He forced a smile. Yeah, sure. If that makes you feel better. It didn't. But it gave me something else. Confirmation. After he left, I didn't waste time. I made the call. The lawyer's office was quiet. Professional. Efficient. I sat across from a man named Mr. Collins, someone recommended by an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. What can I help you with, Mr. Bennett? He asked. I took a deep breath. Then I placed my phone on the table. I think my family is trying to steal from me, I said. The words felt heavy. But they were true. At first, he looked surprised. But as I showed him the messages, the screenshots, the evidence, his expression changed. Serious. Focused. Concerned. This is significant, he said. I figured, I replied. He leaned back in his chair. Have you signed anything? No. Good. That's very good. For the first time since I found the messages, I felt a small sense of relief. We need to act carefully, he said. I understand. And I did. Because this wasn't just about money. Or property. This was about trust. And once that's broken, there's no going back. Over the next few weeks, my life became something I never expected. A quiet investigation. I followed my routine. Acted normal. Smiled when they visited. Answered calls like nothing had changed. But behind the scenes, everything was different. I met with Mr. Collins regularly. We reviewed documents, secured my accounts, placed restrictions where needed. I even hired a private investigator. Something I never thought I'd do in my life. But this wasn't my life anymore. This was something else. Something I had to take control of. The investigator uncovered more than I expected. Attempts to access my accounts. Unusual inquiries. Small actions that, on their own, meant nothing. But together, they told a story. A clear one. They've been preparing for a while, he said. I nodded. I know. Each day, I became more certain of one thing. They had underestimated me. They saw a lonely old man. A grieving husband. Someone easy to manipulate. But they forgot something important. I had lived 65 years. I had built a life. Raised a family. Managed a home. Survived loss. I wasn't weak. I was just quiet. And quiet people notice everything. By the end of the third week, everything was in place. My accounts were protected. My assets secured. My plan ready. All that was left was timing. And I knew exactly when that moment would come. Because they were getting impatient. And impatience leads to mistakes. I sat in my living room one evening, looking at Eleanor's picture again. They think they're winning, I said softly. For a moment, I imagined her response. The way she would smile. The way she would tilt her head and say, "Then don't let them." A small smile formed on my face. "I won't," I said. Because the quiet man they underestimated was no longer just watching. He was ready. By the time I decided to invite them all over, everything was already in place. Every document secured. Every account protected. Every move carefully planned. There was nothing left to prepare. Only one thing left to do. Reveal the truth. But truth, I learned, is not something you throw at people in anger. It's something you present. Carefully. Completely. So there's no escape from it. The idea came to me late one evening. I was sitting in the same chair, in the same quiet living room, staring at Eleanor's photograph. The house was silent, but my mind was not. I had spent weeks gathering evidence. Weeks watching, listening, pretending. And now, I needed to end it. Family dinner, I said softly. The word sounded simple. Almost harmless. But I knew what it really was. It wasn't a dinner. It was a stage. And for the first time in a long time, I would be the one in control. The next morning, I started making calls. One by one. Michael answered first. "Hey, Dad." "Hi, son," I said, keeping my tone warm. "I was thinking, it's been a while since we've all been together. How about dinner at my place this weekend?" There was a short pause. Just a second. But I noticed it. Yeah, that sounds good," he said. "I'll let the others know too," I added. "Great. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it." I wondered if that was true. Next was Claire. She sounded cheerful, as always. "Dad. This is a surprise." "I miss you," I said. And that part, was real. "I miss you too," she replied quickly. I closed my eyes for a moment. "Then come for dinner," I said. "I will," she said without hesitation. Daniel was quieter, less expressive. But he agreed. So did Judith. So did Ryan. By the end of the day, it was settled. Saturday evening. All of them. Under one roof. That night, I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel angry either. What I felt was clarity. Because for weeks, I had been carrying something heavy. The knowledge. The betrayal. The truth they thought I didn't know. And soon, they would carry it too. Saturday arrived faster than I expected. I woke up early. Earlier than usual. There was something about that day that felt final. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the counter. For a moment, I considered ordering food. Keeping things simple. But then I shook my head. "No," I said quietly. "If this is the last time, it should be real." So I cooked. The same dishes Eleanor used to make for family gatherings. Roasted chicken. Mashed potatoes. Fresh vegetables. Even her homemade sauce, the one she never wrote down but I had memorized over the years. As I cooked, memories came back. Laughter in the kitchen. Voices filling the house. The smell of food mixed with warmth and comfort. For a brief moment, it felt like everything was normal again. But then I remembered why I was doing this. And the feeling changed. By late afternoon, the house was ready. The table was set. 6 chairs. 6 plates. 6 glasses. I paused for a moment as I looked at them. 6 people. 5 of them had betrayed me. And one of them had trusted too much. I adjusted my shirt, took a deep breath, and sat down for a moment. "All right," I whispered. "It's time." The first to arrive was Claire. She walked in with a bright smile and open arms. "Dad." She hugged me tightly. And for a second, I almost forgot everything. "Hi, sweetheart," I said softly. "You look good," she said, pulling back. "Trying my best," I replied. Then came Michael. Confident as always. Followed by Daniel. Then Judith. Then Ryan. One by one, they filled the house. Voices returned. Laughter echoed. It looked like a family gathering. It sounded like a family gathering. But it wasn't. I watched them closely. Every smile. Every glance. Every word. Michael walked around like he owned the place. Claire kept checking on me, asking if I needed help. Daniel stayed quiet, observing. Judith made small talk. Ryan stayed on his phone. They were all playing their roles. Just like I was. Dinner went smoothly. Too smoothly. They complimented the food. Asked about my health. Shared small stories. If someone had walked in at that moment, they would have seen a perfect family. But I knew the truth. And soon, so would they. After dinner, I stood up slowly. "I have something I'd like to share," I said. The room quieted. Michael looked curious. Claire smiled. Daniel leaned back slightly. I walked over to the television. My phone was already connected. Everything was ready. I turned back to face them. For a moment, I just looked at them. Really looked at them. These were the people I had trusted. The people I had loved without question. And now, they were about to see what I had seen. I found something recently, I said calmly. No one spoke. Something in my tone had changed. They could feel it. A group chat, I continued. I saw the reaction instantly. It was subtle. But it was there. Michael's posture stiffened. Claire's smile faded slightly. Daniel looked down. Called, real family, I said. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. I pressed play. The screen lit up. The messages appeared. One by one. At first, no one moved. No one spoke. They watched. And as they watched, their expressions changed. Confusion. Recognition. Fear. Claire covered her mouth. Daniel leaned forward. Judith looked at Michael. Michael said nothing. The messages kept playing. Every plan. Every lie. Every betrayal. Out in the open. There was no hiding from it now. No denying it. The room felt smaller. The air heavier. By the time the last message appeared, no one could look at me. I turned off the screen. Silence. Long. Uncomfortable. Then Michael finally spoke. Dad, I can explain. No, I said calmly. Just one word. But it stopped him. I've read everything, I continued. There's nothing left to explain. Claire started crying. Dad, we didn't mean. Didn't mean what? I asked. My voice wasn't loud. But it was firm. Didn't mean to lie. Didn't mean to plan behind my back. Didn't mean to take everything I have. No one answered. Because there was no answer. Daniel spoke next. We were just trying to prepare for the future. I nodded slowly. Yes, I said. You were. I walked over to the table and picked up a set of envelopes. I prepared two. I handed one to each of them. They hesitated. Then opened them. Inside. Legal documents. Michael's face changed first. What is this? He asked. My response, I said. I watched as realization spread across the room. I've secured my accounts, I continued. Moved my assets. Updated my will. Claire shook her head. Dad, please. I looked at her. Really looked at her. I trusted you the most, I said quietly. She broke down completely. Daniel stared at the paper in silence. Judith looked away. Ryan said nothing. And Michael finally understood. You planned this, he said. I nodded. No, I corrected him. You forced me to. The room fell silent again. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was consequence. And for the first time since I found that message, I wasn't the one carrying the weight. They were. The night after the dinner, I didn't sleep. But this time, it wasn't because of shock. It was because of something else. Something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the loud kind. Not the happy kind. But the quiet kind. The kind that comes after a storm finally stops. I sat in the same chair I had been sitting in for weeks. The house was silent again. But now, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. Like something toxic had finally been removed from the air. I looked at Eleanor's photograph on the shelf. For a long time, I didn't speak. Then I finally said, "It's done." Her photo didn't change. Of course it didn't. But somehow, I still felt like she was listening. For the first time in a long time. I didn't feel lost. I didn't feel betrayed. I didn't feel weak. I felt finished. But endings are never as simple as they seem. Because after the truth comes out, life doesn't stop. It adjusts. The next morning started like any other. Sunlight through the window. Coffee brewing. Distant sound of cars outside. But my phone was different. It had been silent all night. No messages. No calls. No group chat activity. Just nothing. And that nothing told me everything I needed to know. They were processing. They were reacting. They were trying to understand how everything fell apart so quickly. But I already knew. It wasn't quick. It had been building for a long time. They just never expected me to notice. I took a sip of coffee and sat at the table. For the first time in weeks. I didn't open the chat. I didn't check messages. I didn't look for more betrayal. Because there was nothing left to find. Instead, I opened a small folder I had prepared earlier. Inside were copies of everything. Screenshots. Documents. Legal notices. Evidence. Not for revenge. Not anymore. But for protection. Because revenge, I realized, is not what I had done. What I had done was something else. Self-preservation. Around noon, my phone finally rang. Michael. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. Then I finally pressed accept. Dad, his voice sounded different. Less confident. Less controlled. More uncertain. Yes. I replied calmly. There was a pause. A long one. We need to talk. I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see me. I think we already did. Another pause. Not like this, he said. I leaned back in my chair. Then how? Silence again. For the first time. Michael didn't have a quick answer. I didn't know you were going to do all that, he finally said. All what? I asked. You know, the lawyer, the accounts, everything. I smiled slightly. Not because it was funny. But because it was predictable. You thought I would do nothing? I asked. I thought you would talk to us first. I did, I said. And that was the truth. They just didn't listen until it was too late. After the call ended, I sat there for a while. Not angry. Not sad. Just aware. Because something important had changed. I was no longer reacting to them. They were reacting to me. That shift was everything. Days passed. Then weeks. The house remained quiet. But now it was a different kind of quiet. Not loneliness. Not abandonment. But distance. A boundary had been created. And I kept it. Claire called once. Then again. Then stopped. Daniel sent a short message. I'm sorry. Nothing more. Judith tried to justify things. Ryan never contacted me again. And Michael. Michael was the only one who kept trying. But even his attempts became less frequent over time. Less confident. More careful. One evening, he asked if we could start over. I didn't answer immediately. I thought about it. Really thought about it. Not as a father. But as a man who had been betrayed. Finally, I said. Start over requires trust. He didn't respond. Because we both knew the truth. Trust doesn't rebuild itself. Not easily. Not quickly. Sometimes not at all. After that, the silence became permanent. But I didn't feel alone. Because I had lived alone before. But this time. It was different. This time, I wasn't waiting for something to change. I wasn't hoping for calls. I wasn't expecting visits. I was living for myself. Weeks later, I made a decision. A big one. I sold the house. Not because I was forced to. Not because I was running away. But because I no longer belonged there. Every room carried memories. Some good. Some painful. But all connected to a version of life that no longer existed. So I let it go. On the last day, I walked through each room slowly. The kitchen. The living room. The hallway. The bedroom. I stopped at Eleanor's picture one last time. I'll carry you with me, I said quietly. Then I packed my things. And left. The new place was smaller. Quieter. Simpler. But it felt right. No group chats. No hidden conversations. No betrayal behind closed doors. Just space. Just time. Just me. And slowly. That was enough. One evening, I sat outside watching the sunset. The sky turned orange, then purple, then dark. And for the first time in years, I didn't think about what I had lost. I thought about what I had saved. My dignity. My independence. My peace. Revenge is a word people often misunderstand. They think it means punishment. Pain. Destruction. But I learned something different. Sometimes, revenge is simply refusing to be used again. Sometimes it's saying no. Sometimes it's walking away. Not loudly. Not violently. But permanently. I took a deep breath that evening and looked at the sky. They thought I was weak, I said quietly. I smiled. But I was just finished being quiet. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone who had finally taken his life back. And that was enough.